County parks and trails have been considered the emerald of Milwaukee for generations, but their budget and the land has been rapidly changing.
Fox 6 weather expert Eric Mangus joins us now in studio to take us through an invasion that is happening right under our feet.
Now, it started as questions around the Mitchell Park Dome, some tweets, and my knowledge of invasive species took a twist. And my fear that the parks were under threat from buckthorn didn't really show the whole story. And there's quite the story. Turns out there are other players in the game. Local government, and money.
The Milwaukee County Parks, a system that manages an area over 15,000 acres. The challenges are similar to those you see in a neighborhood: crime, vandalism, and garbage, but none more glaring than a budget crisis.
It's like it's been estimated that our deferred maintenance is around $500 million.
Deferred what? Jeremy Lucas is the Director of Administration at the Milwaukee County Parks. And what he's talking about is building and infrastructure upkeep, along with other projects that simply won't get done because there isn't the money. Lucas says nationally, most park budgets are funded through property taxes. This red line represents the Milwaukee County Parks budget since 1989. Pretty much has stayed the same, roughly $40 million per year. But what hasn't stayed the same is inflation. Putting each year's budget into what's equivalent in today's dollars, we can see the budget isn't inflating, it's deflating.
But if our budget had kept up with inflation, it would be, over $90 million.
So why can't we just shuffle some money around? Well, as the budget director of Milwaukee County points out,
but generally, if we want to provide large increases to any one department, we're going to have to identify other areas to make decreases.
Lamers tells me at this point, the county's been decreasing for so long, there's nowhere for the money to come from.
So our largest revenue source that we have only goes up by 1% at a time when we're experiencing inflation of as high as 9%.
So the parks rely on creating their own revenue. With rentals, beer gardens, other services. We're not alone. Minneapolis, for example, generates 13% of its park budget. But for Milwaukee,
50% of our budget is revenue that we generate ourselves.
And according to Lucas, is one of the highest levels in the country. But there was a time when the parks weren't focused on the budget, but instead expansion. In the late 19th century, Frederick Olmsted and other park visionaries began rapidly pushing the creation of new public green spaces in Milwaukee. We had everything from ski jumps to horse racing. Parks were integrated in some of the earliest neighborhoods.
The purpose of parks is to serve the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of people.
Virginia Small has studied Milwaukee park history and the history of parks across the nation. When she left the Milwaukee area and returned 35 years later, she noticed a big change.
They had not been funded at the level that would keep them in good shape.
So why does a meteorologist like me care about the park budget? That's where buckthorn and other invasive species come in. This is what a forest with buckthorn looks like. It's still green, so what's the big deal? This is that same forest without buckthorn. Yeah, this European invader is a big deal, and it's only getting worse. Historically, our forest canopies in southeast Wisconsin were made of oaks, maples, ash, and basswood. But buckthorn and dozens of invasive species have thrown a wrench in this. They create dense shade in the understory, preventing sunlight from reaching young trees and plants. It's like putting a tarp over your grass. It kills it. New trees can't grow, and once older trees die, there's nothing to grow in its place. Invasives slowly choke the forest, reducing biodiversity that helps with natural processes that meteorologists really care about, like storm resilience, temperature regulation, and erosion control. A tighter budget means less money dedicated to managing and eradicating buckthorn and other invasives.
But it's like having each staff manage multiple Lambeau fields by themselves.
In total, the Parks Department has 150 parks, trails, and natural areas that have a total area equivalent of 750 Lambeau fields. With so much area to cover, with a limited budget, the Parks Department relies on volunteers, such as Doug Drysdale, to help with buckthorn removal.
Here at Hoyt Park, they choke out 90% or more of the native plants.
Doug and other volunteer groups do what they can to push back the march of buckthorn, but it takes a lot of time, money, and expertise.
Well, we're trying to restore the natural diversity that was here. So there were probably many, many species, 100 or more whether they were trees or plants or shrubs in these areas prior to buckthorn invading.
This is a common theme across the country and the state. Without staff to attack these invasive species, we're losing the next generation of tree right from under our nose. Invasive species and shrinking budgets threaten Milwaukee County Parks and the services they provide. Volunteers and nonprofits have helped manage dozens of parks and donated more than 10,000 man-hours each year.
It's really slow progress at first. It's like turning a big ship, but what you see is the native plants, whether they're spring wildflowers or tree seedlings, they start to fill in when they're getting the sunlight back.
But this isn't happening for all properties the park department manages because of funding.
The 2023 requested budget, we requested almost as much money as the entire bonding budget had for the whole county.
The park's budget will increase $1.8 million in 2023, which, according to Lucas, helps, but will not address the existing structural deficit, which, as I mentioned earlier, is $500 million. To Lucas, dedicated and stable funding increases are the only way out of this.
It's time to change the way that Milwaukee County and local governments are funded.
So that we can think about growing and not worrying about like surviving.
If you'd like to volunteer for your local parks and help slow the spread of buckthorn, other invasive species, or just pick up trash, head to the Milwaukee County Parks website, select the Make a Difference tab, and that'll direct you to friends groups all across the county that can do all kinds of beautiful work. People like Doug, who do some incredible things for our city and for our county as a whole.
Yeah, it seems like that's the easiest thing you can do, right, is volunteer. But the budget issue, that's tough to, I mean, property taxes, there's a lot of other people want that money, whether it's the police department or the gas or the trash department. So, I mean, they really have to rethink how we fund our parks, right?
And to put it in perspective, I thought this story would maybe take a month. I mean, oh yeah, easy, buckthorn, it's perfect, all right there. But, you know, the farther we go into it, there's just more and more layers to that. Again, there's no easy solution. You can put the money where the mouth is and actually start helping out, but again, they need a lot of help.
Right.
We can't just take our parks for granted either. I think a lot of us just do. We don't think about it, right? But they take a lot of money to maintain, to make them beautiful. All right,
We're lucky
nice
to
work.
have them, and I don't want to lose them.
Great
Thanks,
story,
Eric.
eye-opening there. Eric, appreciate it.